Hi Emma, here's another tutorial for you. This is the other thing that you were asking about, using the Liquify tool to make people slimmer or fatter, and generally tweaking photographs to make people look prettier or what have you. So there's a couple of things that we'll look at here. So first things first, the Liquify tool. You get to the Liquify tool by going to the filter menu, and you come down to there where it says Liquify. And it opens up this little interface here, which has its own set of tools over on the left hand side, and it has its own options and adjustment panel over on the right hand side. Now, the first time you use the Liquify tool in Photoshop, it will be in simple mode, and you don't want it in simple mode because it will create a problem for you. What you need to do is you need to tick the advanced mode box there, and what that will do is it will show you some more advanced options. Now, the reason that you want to do that is because by default the show backdrop option will not be on, and that's a problem because what will happen is if you make any adjustments to your image, you won't actually see them taking place live. What you need to do is you need kind of the original image to sort of be behind where your changes are so that you actually see them taking place on the fly. Now, to do that, what you do is you tick this show backdrop option box here, and you have all layers behind. If you do that, then you will see changes taking place. So just make sure you do that. The other thing to be aware of is that when you hit this advanced mode, here are the options where you can adjust how fast and how strong the effects are that these tools over on the left hand side are doing. So you probably do want that open to be able to tweak those sorts of things. Now, what I'm going to show you here is a trick that's beloved of all your fashion magazines like Cosmopolitan and stuff like that, where there have been some criticism of this sort of thing in Photoshop, where they make models look slimmer and prettier and what have you because it causes young girls to sort of chase impossible dreams and make them anorexic and stuff like that. So it's a little bit contentious, this. But if you want to know how to do it, what you do is you use this Liquify tool. So anything like this, if you're doing it on fashion shots, I would caution you not to make sort of women look like they're sort of impossibly pretty, because you've got a bit of a responsibility towards young girls seeing that sort of thing and then sticking their fingers down their throat and getting bulimia and stuff like that, which the fashion industry is very guilty of. But anyway, all preaching aside, here's how you do this sort of thing. So this model is far from ugly, but what we can do is we can make her a little bit prettier, and one of the things that we can use is the Liquify interface to do it. So you can see that there's a bunch of tools there over on the left hand side, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the zoom tool at the bottom there and click and zoom in a little bit just so you can see a little bit better what we're actually doing here. Now, there are a lot of tools on there, but you can get away with using pretty much just two of them really, more than anything. And the two that you'd want to use to get the best effects in the easiest way would be the second tool down here, which is the reconstruct tool, and this tool down here, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th tool down, which is the bloat tool. The bloat tool, what that will do is it will sort of bloat things outwards. There is another tool called the pucker tool, which will suck things inwards. But you'll find that, so they kind of do the opposite of one another, but what you'll find is that the bloat tool is easier to use. So I'm going to click that bloat tool there, and I'm going to come over to this panel options here, and I'm going to make sure that the brush is, the rate it's on is fairly low. Otherwise, what will happen is when you go to use this tool, it will be very intense and it will do the effects too quickly. So I would recommend backing that off a little bit. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go for that cliche fashion shot thing that they do, where they enlarge people's pupils so that they look like they're in love with you. That cliche effect of, oh, someone's pupils are dilated because they're looking at you and they want to see more of you because they're in love with you. They do this a lot in fashion magazines. It's pretty simple to do with that bloat tool. You can see that I've got a brush there. I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. Remember, that's the left and right square bracket keys. Left square bracket key, make your brush a bit smaller, right square bracket key, make it bigger. So I'm going to get the brush about the same size as the pupil. I'm just going to click and release the mouse button a couple of times just to make a pupil look like it's a little bit more dilated. And obviously what I'm going to do is going to do the same thing on the other pupil. There you go. Enlarged pupils, she's obviously in love with you. Now, the other thing that you'd want to do with the bloat tool is you can make someone slimmer. Now, she's far from being fat, but she isn't that gaunt model look that is very trendy in fashion magazines. So we can use the bloat tool to do that. I'm going to make the brush slightly larger, and notice that what I've got is I've got the brush positioned outside her cheek line. So what the bloat tool will be doing is, even though it pushes things, it will be pushing them inwards, so it will make her cheek go in. So I'm going to click and hold the mouse button, and I'm going to drive that circle along the edge of there, and you can see that what that's doing is that is pushing her cheek in. I could do it the other way by using the pucker tool and getting that on the inside and sort of sucking her cheek inwards. So they kind of do the opposite of one another, but you'll find that the using the bloat tool on the outside of lines is generally a little bit easier. So I can push her cheek in there, make her look a little bit slimmer. I can do the same thing on her jawline there, maybe push that in a little bit. So she's lost a little bit of weight. I could sort of do that on her cheeks and what have you if I wanted to. I'm not going to go completely over the top with it. The other thing that I could do is I could use this bloat tool on her lips to sort of pout those a little bit, give her that kind of collagen injection look. Got to be a little bit careful. You don't want to make her look, give her the cliche trout pout. But you can see there that if I do that, what I can do is I can just sort of like blow her lips out for that kind of Angelina Jolie look, if you want, that kind of thing. Make sure that you do stuff like this. It's subtle, you know, you don't want to be going completely over the top with it. Now, of course, when we're distorting images like this, what can happen is it can cause unwanted effects as well. You can see that in pushing that cheek line in there, that jawline, what I've also done is I've distorted her hair here, and that would be a dead giveaway that I've been tweaking this photograph. So there is also a reconstruct tool. The reconstruct tool will let you put things back how they were. For example, if I use this reconstruct tool over her pupil, you can see that's making her pupil smaller again. Obviously I don't want to do that, I want it bloated, so I'm going to put that back how it was. But more importantly, this reconstruct tool will allow you to sort things out. Like you can see her hair has been distorted here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this reconstruct tool to kind of sort that out a little bit. You can see that's putting her hair back how it was, so it isn't obvious that we've done a push on the side of her face. You've got to be a little bit careful with this, because if you use the reconstruct tool over bits that you've adjusted, what it's going to do is it's going to put them back as well. You can see that that is doing that there. So you've got to be a little bit careful about where you place it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command Z, which will undo the last thing that I did, which will put that back how it was. So you can see, there we go, that's how you sort of adjust someone. When you're happy with the changes that you've made, what you can do is you can click the OK button, and if we have a look here, you can see there is my adjusted image, and if I go up to the File menu and hit Revert to put this back how it was, what we'll see is what it originally looked like. So there you can see that's what the changes look like. I can hit Undo the revert and put it back like that. So you can see you can make fairly radical changes with that, that filter Liquify. You've got a little bit of a responsibility to not sort of push that sort of fashion agenda of making people look too slim on things like that. But you can improve things. You know, you can take the edges of the corners of people's mouths up and make them look like they're smiling and things like that, and what have you. Now, the other thing that you typically want to do on a fashion photograph is improve the complexion of someone. You can see on this image that what we've got is we've got reflections on her chin. You can see a little bit of some blemishes in her complexion there. You can see some of the pores on there. And although that's a fairly natural look, it's not what fashion magazines go for. So what we're going to do is we're going to go for that fashion magazine look. Now, the way that you do that is like this. You can see that I've got one layer here at the moment on here, the background layer. But what I want to do is I want to duplicate that layer. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can duplicate a layer. Way number one is you could use the keyboard shortcut, which is Command J, or you can go to the Layers Panel Option menu, this little thing here. You can click on that and you can choose Duplicate Layer. Notice that Photoshop doesn't always tell you what the keyboard shortcuts are alongside things. Keyboard shortcut to duplicate a layer is Command J, but it's not showing it you there. So, you know, if you can't remember that keyboard shortcut, you can do it this way. So I'm going to hit Duplicate Layer, and it comes up with this. Now, not a bad idea to name your layers. At this point, it's giving me the option to do that. So I'm going to call this layer Blur, like that. I'm going to hit OK. If you forget to do that and you want to rename a layer, you can double click on what the layer's called and type something in there. So, you know, not bad practice to name your layers, because in complicated Photoshop jobs you can end up with 10 or 20 layers, and it's helpful if they're not called copy of layer 2 and duplicate of layer 3 and stuff like that. So what we've got is we've got a layer here called blur, which is probably going to hint at what we're going to do here, which is we're going to put a filter on it. We're going to go up to the filter menu and we're going to choose blur. Lots of different blurs that you've got in Photoshop, but generally speaking, your go-to blur would be this one, Gaussian blur. Gaussian being an average mathematical calculation. You don't really need to know that. Just remember that that's the one that you typically go for. So I'm going to hit that, and this dialog box comes up. Now, it might seem over the top, but if you put the blur on maybe 8 or 9 or something like that, and then hit OK, you can see now what we've got is we've got a very blurred layer. Now the trick here is to only use parts of this layer and use them slightly translucently to make it look like she's got a softer complexion. So what we need to do is we need to rub out the bits that we don't want to be blurred. Now to do that, what you are choosing is the erase tool. The shortcut for the erase tool is E. You can see there little tooltips popped up, or you can just click on the thing. Now remember, the erase tool is a brush, so you can make that bigger or smaller with the left and right square bracket keys. And you probably will want to do that on various bits and pieces so that it makes life easier. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to rub out where her eye is. Now, if you start using any tools and it doesn't seem to be having that effect, what you want to watch out for is these things up here where it says opacity and flow. It's rubbing out fully because the opacity and flow are on 100%. If you're only getting it partially working, you want to look up there and make sure that's not on 50% or 25%, that kind of thing. So I'm going to rub out where her other eye is there, like that. I'm going to rub out where her eyebrow is there. I'm going to rub out where her other eyebrow is there. I'm also going to rub out where her mouth is. That's where you might possibly want to make the brush a little bit smaller, but where you go into the corner of her mouth. But you can kind of get away with a lot here. You probably want to rub out where her jawline is there. So we have a very defined shadow at the bottom of there. Probably want to rub out where the base of her nose is so that her nostrils aren't blurred. And then the other thing that you'd want to make sure was rubbed out was anything that would be, if it wasn't sharp on a photograph, it would give it away that you've put a blur on it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make the brush quite a bit wider, like that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rub out everywhere where her hair is, because if her hair's out of focus, it will be very obvious that we've done a blur job on this. The other thing is the material of her sweatshirt that she's wearing. If that was blurred, it would be very obvious that we've done a blur on that. So effectively what I've done here is I've pretty much rubbed out everything apart from where her complexion is. Now if we want to see that, if we go to the layers panel here and we turn off the background layer so that we can only see that blur layer, you'll see that what I've actually got is that now. Lots of the layer is rubbed out, but the bits where her complexion are remain. Now, you could leave it like that if you wanted to, but it's a bit over the top. So what you typically do with that blur layer is you would back the opacity off. You can see you've got opacity 100%. There's a little drop away thing there that gives you a slider, and what you can do is you can slide that back a little bit so that we're making that blurred layer slightly transparent. I think around about 40–50%, something like that's probably going to be about right for this. And if we want to see the difference between that layer being on and that layer being off, what we can do is we can turn layers on or off with these little eye icons here. So I'm going to click on that thing there, and you can see the difference. When I'm toggling that, what it's doing is it's giving her a softer complexion. So in other words, don't believe any of those photographs of models or actresses or what have you that you see in fashion magazines, because they love doing this sort of thing to them and cracking on that these people are incredibly beautiful when in fact they look just the same as you and I, and it's all Photoshop. Now the other thing that you'd want to bear in mind with this is we've got layers here. Now, anytime that you want to do effects in Photoshop, the trick is you get the layers to do the work for you. You can see that that's what we've done here. But there are only certain file formats that can be saved where it will support layers. In other words, if you go to save this image, you go File, Save As. It's only going to give you a few options. It will give you Photoshop, so it'll save it as a PSD file, or it will let you save it as a TIFF, which is another format, that's tagged image file format. That's another format that supports layers. But most people will probably want to save things as perhaps a JPEG or maybe a PNG. Now, when you choose that, what you need to be aware of is that the JPEG format and PNG formats and stuff like that, they don't really support layers. So typically what you do when you do something like this is you save a version with the layers active. So you'd go save as, and then maybe save that somewhere with all the layers. And then what you would do is you would flatten the layers down to allow you to save it in a more usable format. So if you want to flatten layers, what you do is you go to the layer menu there, and right down near the bottom there you can see flatten image. And what that does is it merges all the layers together. Now the reason that I saved a version with the layers is if somebody suddenly decided that they didn't want that tweak on there, on this flattened version we can't get back to that blurred layer. What we need to do is we need to open up our one with the layers on. But with a flattened version, what you can do is you can save it in any image format you like. So typically you could save it as a JPEG, call it whatever the hell you want, and it will have no problem with it. So most of the time when you're doing this sort of fancy stuff in Photoshop, keep a layered version of it that you can fully edit, go back to and play around with. But the finished photograph that you want to use on your website or in your magazine or what have you, flatten it, go to the layer menu, flatten it, and then save that as a flattened version. And you'll be good to go. So there you go, there's how you tweak photographs up, make people slimmer, make them have lovely complexions, make them have big beautiful eyes and all that kind of stuff. There you go. Hope you enjoyed that and hope it makes it easy for you to sort out your photographs, Emma. Have fun. Bye.